The barren expanse of Earth in 2234 stretched out before Timothy like a somber testament to humanity's misdeeds. Mangled metal carcasses of once majestic towers jutted from the scorched earth, silent witnesses to the nuclear devastation that had transformed the world. Timothy's augmented senses detected the faintest whisper of wind, carrying with it the acrid scent of decay and radiation. Perched on a crumbling concrete slab, Timothy's eyes scanned the horizon. His genetic modifications, which had made him a new kind of human, allowed him to spot movement from miles away and distinguish between the heat signatures of mutated beasts and frightened survivors. It was both a curse and a blessing, forcing him to bear witness to the daily struggle for survival in this harsh new reality. A distant scream pierced the eerie silence, causing Timothy's muscles to tense and prepare for action. In a blur of movement imperceptible to ordinary eyes, he leaped from his perch and raced towards the source of the distress. As he neared, the scene unfolded with brutal clarity. A group of scavengers, hollow-eyed and desperate, had cornered a family amidst the ruins of a long-abandoned shopping mall. The father stood protectively in front of his wife and child, brandishing a rusted pipe against the encircling attackers. "Back off!" Timothy's voice boomed across the debris-strewn parking lot. The scavengers turned, their eyes widening at the sight of his imposing figure. Timothy, standing over 6 feet tall with scars crisscrossing his exposed arms, evidence of countless battles, was a formidable sight. The leader of the group, a wiry man with a scruffy beard, sneered, "This isn't your business, freak. Walk away if you know what's good for you." Timothy's lips curled into a humorless smile. "You're right, this isn't my business. It's my duty." What followed was a whirlwind of action. Timothy moved with inhuman speed, disarming the first attacker before the man could even react. A second attacker lunged with a knife, only to find his wrist caught in Timothy's iron grip. The crack of bone was audible as Timothy applied pressure. The remaining scavengers fled, leaving their moaning comrades behind. Turning to the family, Timothy softened his voice. "Are you all right?" The father nodded, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. "Thank you," he stammered. "We've heard stories about people like you, new humans. I never thought—" Timothy cut him off with a raised hand. "Save your thanks. Get your family to safety. There's a settlement about 10 miles east. Tell them Timothy sent you." As the family gathered their meager belongings, Timothy's enhanced hearing picked up a new sound, the low hum of advanced engines. He looked up, squinting against the glare of the sun. A sleek silver craft, unlike anything he'd ever seen, was descending from the clouds. "What fresh nightmare is this?" Timothy muttered, watching as the ship landed on the outskirts of the ruined city. Aboard the yyan luxury cruiser, Celeste adjusted her holographic view screen, zooming in on the desolate landscape below. Her platinum hair cascaded over her azure shoulders, catching the light from the ship's crystal chandeliers. "Oh, how quaint," she purred, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look at this, Quentin. They haven't even cleared away the rubble from their little conflict." Quentin, her rotund companion, waddled over, nearly spilling his iridescent cocktail. "Fascinating, truly fascinating," he wheezed. To think less than 2 centuries ago, they considered themselves the dominant species of this sector. Celeste laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "And now look at them, scurrying about like vermin in the ruins of their own making. This will make such an amusing anecdote at the galactic soiree next cycle." The ship's captain, a stern-faced yyan named Varis, approached with a slight bow. "My lady, we've identified a suitable landing zone. Shall I begin the descent?" Celeste waved a hand dismissively. Yes, let's proceed. I'm dying to see these charming savages up close." As the ship gracefully touched down on the outskirts of the ruined city, Celeste studied her reflection in a nearby mirror, adjusting her shimmering gown. "Now remember, everyone," she addressed her fellow tourists, "do try not to touch anything. Who knows what sort of primitive diseases these creatures might carry." The group tittered nervously as the ship's door slid open with a soft hiss. Celeste stepped out first, her delicate nose wrinkling at the acrid air. "Oh my," she exclaimed, "it's even more dreadful than I imagined. How thrilling! The yyan tourists began their safari, picking their way through the rubble with expressions of disgust and fascination. Celeste led the way, her anti-grav boots keeping her hovering inches above the debris-strewn ground. "Look there," she called out, pointing to a small group of humans foraging in the distance. "See how they scrabble in the dirt like animals? It's almost endearing in a pitiful sort of way." Quentin chuckled, his multiple chins jiggling. Indeed, who would have thought the self-proclaimed masters of the universe would end up like this? It's positively delicious. Their laughter echoed across the wasteland, drawing curious and fearful glances from the few humans within earshot. Celeste reveled in their discomfort, feeling a surge of superiority. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from a nearby pile of twisted metal. The yyan tourists froze, their amusement evaporating in an instant. What was that? Quentin whimpered, cowering behind Celeste. Before anyone could respond, a massive shape burst from the rubble, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and metal, easily twice the size of a normal human. Razor-sharp claws glinted in the pale sunlight as it fixed its mutated eyes on the terrified yyan. Celeste screamed, all pretense of superiority forgotten in the face of true danger. "Guards! Guards!" she shrieked. But the creature was faster. It lunged towards her, jaws gaping wide. In that moment of terror, a blur of movement caught Celeste's eye. A figure seemed to materialize out of nowhere, placing itself between the monster and the yyan. Timothy stood his ground, muscles coiled and ready. He locked eyes with the mutant, a silent challenge passing between them. The creature hesitated for a split second, sensing a predator even more dangerous than itself. That moment of hesitation was all Timothy needed. He exploded into action, moving with a speed and grace that defied his size. His fist connected with the mutant's jaw with a sickening crunch, sending the beast staggering backward. The mutant roared in pain and fury, swiping at Timothy with its massive claws, but Timothy was already moving, ducking under the attack and driving his knee into the creature's middle. The impact lifted the mutant off its feet, sending it crashing into a nearby wall. Celeste watched in stunned silence as Timothy methodically dismantled the monster. His movements were precise, almost beautiful in their brutality. Each punch, each kick was calculated to inflict maximum damage while expending minimal energy. The fight, if it could even be called that, was over in less than a minute. The mutant lay broken and whimpering at Timothy's feet. Without a hint of mercy, Timothy grasped its misshapen head and twisted sharply. The crack of snapping vertebrae echoed in the sudden silence. Timothy turned to face the yyan tourists, his chest heaving slightly from exertion. His eyes were hard and unyielding as they swept over the group before settling on Celeste. "You're welcome," he said, his voice gruff and devoid of warmth. Celeste struggled to find her voice, her earlier bravado shattered. I don't understand. Who are you?" A fleeting smile crossed Timothy's face, gone so quickly Celeste wasn't sure she'd seen it at all. "Just one of those pitiful creatures you came to gawk at," he replied. "Now, if you're done with your safari, I suggest you get back to your ship. The noise will attract more unwanted attention." As if to punctuate his words, a chorus of inhuman howls rose in the distance. The yyan looked at each other in panic, all thoughts of superiority forgotten. "Wait," Celeste called out as Timothy turned to leave. "You can't just leave us here. We don't know how to survive." Timothy raised an eyebrow. "Funny, a few minutes ago you seemed to have it all figured out." Celeste felt a flush of shame color her cheeks. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Help us." Timothy studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, but understand this. Out here, your fancy clothes and advanced technology mean nothing. You follow my lead and do what I say when I say it. Otherwise, I'll leave you to fend for yourselves. Clear?" Celeste nodded quickly, relief washing over her as Timothy began issuing orders, organizing the group for a swift retreat. She couldn't help but steal glances at him. This new human, was unlike anything she had expected to find on this backward planet. For the first time since landing, Celeste felt a flicker of something other than contempt, a mix of fascination, fear, and something else that made her heart race in a way unrelated to the danger they faced. As they hurried through the ruins, following Timothy's lead, Celeste realized that her meticulously planned safari had taken an unexpected turn. Deep down, in a part of herself she rarely acknowledged, she was thrilled by the prospect. Timothy led the group of yyan through the treacherous landscape, his enhanced senses alert for any signs of danger. The alien tourists stumbled behind him, their pristine outfits already smeared with grime and sweat. Celeste, despite her earlier bravado, struggled the most, her anti-grav boots ill-suited for the uneven terrain. "How much further?" she panted, trying to keep up with Timothy's relentless pace. Timothy glanced back, a mixture of amusement and irritation in his expression. "Tired already, princess? We've barely covered 5 miles. Celeste bristled at the nickname. "I'll have you know that on my home world, I'm considered quite the adventurer." "Let me guess," Timothy smirked. "Adventure tourism in perfectly controlled environments?" Celeste started to reply, but her words were cut short as she stumbled over a piece of debris. Timothy's hand shot out, catching her arm before she could fall. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. For a moment, they stood frozen, eyes locked. Timothy could feel the softness of her skin, so different from the calloused hands he was used to. Celeste marveled at the raw strength in his grip, gentle yet unyielding. Timothy broke the contact first, clearing his throat. "Watch your step. I can't keep saving you every 5 minutes." As they continued their journey, the group faced various challenges that highlighted the harsh realities of post-apocalyptic Earth. They navigated through fields of rusted vehicles, their metal frames creaking ominously in the wind. Timothy expertly guided them past hidden pitfalls and radioactive hotspots, his knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the wasteland as Timothy led the group of yyan through the crumbling ruins of the old world. The city, once bustling with life, was now a grim reminder of humanity's downfall. The aliens, their once pristine outfits now grimy and worn, struggled to keep pace. Celeste, despite her earlier bravado, seemed increasingly out of her depth. Timothy kept a steady pace, his senses alert for any signs of danger. He glanced back occasionally to ensure the yyan were keeping up, noting Celeste's labored breaths and the sweat glistening on her brow. "How much further, Timothy?" Celeste panted, her anti-grav boots struggling to maintain their effectiveness on the uneven ground. "We're making good time," Timothy replied tersely, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Just a few more miles to the safe zone." Quentin, the portly alien with the iridescent cocktail, wheezed beside Celeste. "Do you have any idea how long this will take? We're not exactly built for this kind of exercise." Timothy's eyes narrowed. "We're crossing a dangerous stretch of territory. If you want to stay alive, keep up." The group moved in silence, their footsteps echoing through the skeletal remains of skyscrapers and abandoned vehicles. The atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive, with the stench of decay and radiation becoming almost unbearable. Suddenly, Timothy stopped, raising a hand for silence. The yyan halted, their faces tense. Timothy's heightened senses had picked up something, an odd sound faintly carried by the wind. "What is it?" Celeste whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Hold on," Timothy replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I need to check something." He moved swiftly, weaving through the debris with practiced ease. The yyan watched anxiously as Timothy disappeared into a nearby alley. Moments later, he returned, his expression grim. "We've got trouble," Timothy said, his voice low. "It looks like there's a raider camp up ahead. We need to be careful." Celeste's face paled. "Raiders? Is it dangerous?" Timothy nodded. "More than you can handle. They're not just scavengers. They're organized and ruthless. If they catch us, they'll take everything we have and then some." Celeste swallowed hard. "What do we do?" "We need to bypass the camp," Timothy said. "I know a route that will get us around it, but it's risky. It'll take longer and might be more challenging, but it's our safest option." Celeste exchanged nervous glances with her companions. "Lead the way," she said, her voice resolute despite her fear. As the group veered off the main route, they entered a less traveled path through the ruins. The terrain became even more treacherous. Piles of rubble, collapsed buildings, and toxic waste areas marked their progress. Timothy's enhanced senses remained on high alert. The path he chose was one of the most dangerous, filled with hidden hazards and unstable ground. The yyan struggled to keep up, their earlier arrogance replaced by growing apprehension. After a grueling hour of navigating through the wasteland, they reached a narrow tunnel leading into the earth, a potential shelter from the raiders. Timothy motioned for the group to enter. "This tunnel will lead us to a safer location," Timothy explained. "But it's dark and cramped, so stay close and follow my lead." Celeste hesitated at the entrance, her fear palpable. "How long will we be underground?" "Not long," Timothy reassured her. "Just until we're clear of the raiders." The group filed into the tunnel, their footsteps echoing off the walls. The darkness was almost complete, broken only by the faint glow of Timothy's enhanced vision and the weak lights on their suits. The tunnel was damp and cold, the air thick with the smell of mildew. Timothy moved with practiced ease, his enhanced senses guiding him through the maze of passages. The yyan, on the other hand, stumbled frequently, their discomfort growing with each step. Hours seemed to stretch endlessly as they navigated the labyrinthine tunnel. Finally, Timothy stopped at a metal grate. He examined it carefully before giving a nod. "We're almost out," he said. "There's a small access point up ahead that will lead us to the surface." He pried open the grate with ease, revealing a narrow shaft leading to a hidden exit. One by one, the yyan emerged from the tunnel, blinking in the dim light of a new, somewhat less hazardous area. The surface was a desolate expanse of scorched earth and crumbling buildings, but it was free of raiders. Celeste took a deep breath, her relief evident. "We made it," she said, her voice filled with exhaustion and gratitude. "Thank you, Timothy." Timothy nodded, his expression impassive. "We're not out of the woods yet. We still have to reach the settlement." The group resumed their journey, though the atmosphere was now one of subdued relief rather than panic. The yyan, though still uncomfortable, seemed to be adjusting to their circumstances. As they moved forward, Timothy kept a close eye on the surroundings. The settlement, though not far, would be their final destination, a place of relative safety amidst the chaos. Celeste fell into step beside Timothy, her earlier fear replaced by a newfound respect. "I have to admit, I underestimated you," she said, her tone more sincere than before. "This world is far harsher than I ever imagined." Timothy glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. "This world has a way of showing you what's real. It's not all about advanced technology and shiny surfaces. Out here, it's survival of the fittest." Celeste nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I'm beginning to understand that." As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the wasteland, the group pushed on. The settlement, though still distant, symbolized hope, a beacon of refuge in a world defined by its harsh realities. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in the eerie twilight of dusk. The remains of the ruined city stretched out behind them, a dark silhouette against the fading light. Timothy led the group through a sparse, desolate landscape towards the distant settlement, their final beacon of safety. As the group trudged forward, the yyan tourists, though visibly exhausted, were more cautious and attentive. Celeste, in particular, walked closely behind Timothy, her earlier disdain replaced by a mix of wariness and respect. The terrain was uneven and scattered with debris, but Timothy's expert navigation kept them on a relatively stable path. An hour into their journey, Timothy signaled for a stop. They had reached the edge of a shallow valley that led towards the settlement. From their vantage point, they could see the settlement's lights twinkling in the distance, a modest oasis of safety amid the wasteland. "We're close now," Timothy said, his voice low. "We need to approach cautiously. The settlement is fortified, but they don't take kindly to strangers, especially ones who look like they've been through a storm." Celeste's face showed a flicker of concern. "What should we expect?" "Guard patrols," Timothy explained. "They'll be on the lookout for any signs of trouble. Just follow my lead and stay calm." Let me do the talking. As they began their descent into the valley, Timothy's enhanced senses detected movement. He raised a hand, signaling the group to halt. From the shadows emerged a pair of armed sentries, their faces hidden behind masks and their weapons at the ready. "Halt!" One of the sentries called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Who goes there?" Timothy stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm Timothy. I'm bringing some travelers to the settlement. We've had a rough time and need to seek refuge." The sentries exchanged wary glances. "Travelers? You look more like survivors of a battle. What's your business here?" "Just seeking shelter," Timothy replied. "I can vouch for them. They're not a threat." The sentries scrutinized Timothy and his group, their eyes lingering on the yyan. Celeste, noticing the tension, took a step forward, attempting to project an air of confidence. "We come in peace. We're just trying to survive, like everyone else." The sentries appeared unmoved by Celeste's words. "You'll need to be vetted before you're allowed in," one of them said. "Follow us." The sentries led them through a series of checkpoints, their weapons always in view. The settlement's defenses were impressive, a network of barricades, watchtowers, and fortified gates. It was clear that this place had weathered many storms and was prepared for more. Finally, they reached a large gate adorned with various symbols of protection. The sentries signaled for them to wait as they consulted with a more senior guard. After a few tense minutes, the gate creaked open, revealing a bustling, albeit modest, settlement. The interior was a stark contrast to the desolate wasteland outside. Though the buildings were makeshift, they were well-maintained, and the streets were lit by a series of flickering lights. The air was filled with the sounds of life, murmurs of conversation, the clinking of metal, and the occasional laughter of children. As Timothy and the yyan entered the settlement, they were met with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Settlers of various ages and backgrounds paused to observe the newcomers. Celeste noted the looks of both intrigue and apprehension on their faces. A tall figure approached them, clad in a rugged uniform and wearing a commanding presence. His eyes, sharp and observant, assessed the group with a practiced gaze. "I'm Commander Tarek," the man said, his voice firm but not unkind. "I'm in charge of security here. What's your story?" Timothy stepped forward. "I'm Timothy. We were passing through the wasteland and encountered some trouble with raiders. I brought them here for shelter." Commander Tarek's gaze shifted to Celeste and her companions. "And these are?" "Tourists," Timothy said. "They were caught up in the chaos and needed help." Tarek studied the yyan carefully. "You're fortunate we have room. We don't often take in outsiders, especially ones who look as though they've been through a lot." Celeste took a deep breath, trying to present herself as composed despite her fatigue. "We understand. We're grateful for any assistance you can provide." Tarek nodded. "We'll get you settled for the night, but you'll have to adhere to our rules. We'll conduct a full assessment of your belongings and ensure there's no risk to our community." As they were led through the settlement, Timothy took the opportunity to give Celeste a brief overview of the place. "The settlement might seem strict, but it's for a reason. They've survived this long by being cautious. You'll find it's not as harsh as it seems, as long as you respect their rules." Celeste nodded, her gaze sweeping over the settlement with renewed appreciation. "Thank you, Timothy. I'm beginning to see that survival out here involves more than just brute strength." They were escorted to a temporary lodging area where they could rest and recover. The facilities were basic but functional, providing a welcome respite from the harsh conditions of the outside world. As night fell, the settlement's lights cast a warm glow over the area. The hum of activity continued, a reassuring sign of resilience and community. Celeste, despite her initial discomfort, found herself beginning to relax. Sitting by a small table in their assigned quarters, Celeste observed Timothy, who had taken a moment to himself, leaning against the wall and surveying the surroundings with a guarded expression. "Do you always stay so alert?" Celeste asked, breaking the silence. Timothy glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Old habits die hard. Out here, you never really know what might happen next. It's best to be prepared." Celeste nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that. This place, though, it's a stark contrast to what we're used to. It's impressive." Timothy offered a rare, genuine smile. It is. They've built something strong and enduring amidst all this chaos. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's still hope. The conversation drifted into silence as both Celeste and Timothy contemplated their surroundings. The settlement, with all its challenges and defenses, represented a glimmer of hope in a world so often defined by its desolation. As Celeste settled down for the night, her mind swirled with thoughts of the day's events. The encounter with the raiders, Timothy's unexpected kindness, and the resilience of the settlement were all pieces of a larger puzzle she was slowly beginning to understand. For Timothy, the night was a time of reflection. He had helped the yyan reach safety, but he knew their presence could attract more attention. The settlement was a fragile sanctuary, and he would do everything in his power to ensure its continued survival. The stars began to emerge in the dark sky, casting their light over the settlement. It was a small, yet significant, reminder of the vastness of the universe and the small, determined community that had managed to carve out a place of refuge within it. As sleep began to take hold, Celeste's thoughts were filled with a newfound sense of purpose. The harsh lessons of survival were becoming clearer, and she found herself embracing the challenge of this new world, one step at a time.